Hi, this is Anthony, parent of IRS Medic, and with 87,000 new IRS employees looming on the horizon, ready to take our situation as it is and just magnify it. Boy, people have a lot of questions and there's a lot of angst. Particularly people overseas or people with offshore things, they have questions about what they should do. There's a whole bunch of people who are called accidental Americans, and they're wondering, should I enter the US tax system? There's US expats overseas. Maybe they haven't been in the tax system in a while. Maybe they want to leave. Maybe they want to expatriate. Maybe they just don't know what to do. Well, that's what this episode is here for today. For people, questions, real questions that our resident layman has been getting. Keith Redmond, he's been getting these questions, and so we're going to answer today. Helping us out today is the great John Richardson. So we're going to go through a lot of these questions people are having about their their how to deal with the IRS and how to deal with citizenship-based taxation, and maybe how to renounce citizenship. And I think we might touch upon some of the other issues that might pop up in the country that you're in. So with that, Keith, John, welcome. Keith, I want to start off with you. What's going on here? What is the temperature? What's the pulse of reality right now?
Well, it's interesting, with the discussion about 87,000 new IRS agents and whether that number is correct or not, it doesn't matter. There's going to be new IRS agents with the infusion of money into the IRS.
Absolutely.
And as a result, I've been getting a lot of queries. And as both of you know, and a lot of people who listen, I'm kind of, with some people, the first stop people come to kind of ascertain, where do I go from here? Do I go and get US tax compliant? Do I just stay with what I'm doing? Do I renounce? Do I not renounce? Do I get US tax compliant to renounce, etc.? And there are so many questions that are swirling around. And you have the Americans overseas population, and you have the accidental Americans population, and everything in between. And so people are asking themselves, well, what do I do? For example, somebody who wants to buy a house or sell a house, but they've never been in the US tax system. What does that look like? Should they just stay silent and keep moving forward with their lives? Should they not? And there are a lot of factors involved before one makes that decision. Does someone go to a US tax professional and, have them do a simulation to see what their tax liability will look like? Will it be prohibitive, or will it be something that is manageable based on what they're trying to do? And I recognize that there's no cookie cutter approach because everybody has their own situation. But I've been getting I've been going through and getting some pretty, some standard questions that I'd like to pose to both of you and
Okay.
just get your thoughts on it.
Okay, that sounds great. You know what? And I want to do that. And I want to start off probably with the biggest question we can get to right now.
Yeah.
And I just imagine that this is the most pressing one, that there's so many people who are in the US tax system right now and they're overseas and they're trying to say, should I renounce right now? Is that a question you're getting, Keith, or am I making that up?
Yeah, no, it is a question. They're like, okay, well, we see how things are going. Is this the time for me to renounce? And again, it's based on one's particular financial profile, familial profile, their links to the US, etc. So yes, that is a fair question to ask.
All right, well, let's go with John. John, should they renounce? Should someone overseas who's an expat, who's running a business,
Right.
who is worried about global getting all their compliance in there with all the tricks the IRS is doing, and I mean they are tricks. They are tricks. What do you say, John?
Well, I do not say this with any great pleasure, but I think they need to get out as quickly as possible.
Okay.
I mean, unless they have a clear intention of moving back to the United States, and that, I mean, for the last 10 years, it has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And I do not think that it is possible anymore for people to survive in any way other than a basic job and maybe one or two bank accounts without problems.
That is a sobering response, and we
Yeah.
certainly have had some of our guests on here renounce and go through we've known a lot of people who've gone through the process, the very expensive process to renounce. And the question then becomes, I guess, if we do decide to renounce, Should we renounce properly, or should we just say, "Hey, see you later. I'm not going to deal with you anymore"? What would you
Right,
say?
just to pay the $2,350 and get your certificate of loss of nationality and move forward, or become U.S. tax compliant and then
Right.
do it and move forward,
Right. So I
or
think, yeah.
or
Oh,
do it
options.
after you renounce if you qualify for that special program for certain Americans overseas that came out in September 2019. So there's a lot of moving parts.
So those are the basically the three your three options are, do you just sort of, because it's not just one thing, you are renouncing your citizenship, and then there's also a process to leave the US tax system, and those are the two things that happen. So which one do you do? Both things, everything, nothing? And that's kind of where people have a lot of questions. So John, what do you say? Do you think those are the people's options, or are there other ones that we're not thinking of?
Well, I think that, the options are, first of all, prescribed by law. All right. I mean, let's talk about legal options. Yes, one can renounce U.S. citizenship without being tax compliant. I mean, there's separate laws. That's just a simple, fact of the matter. Renouncing U.S. citizenship, like everything else in the U.S., has a tax consequence, right? And the tax consequence is, well, there's two. There's the good, there's the bad, and the ugly, right? Or three, right? Three, the good, the bad, the ugly. The good is that you renounce U.S. citizenship and you cease to be a U.S. tax resident from the day of renunciation. So, I think, Keith, you were talking about buying or selling a house or something,
Just as an example, yeah.
the U.S. has a capital gains tax on a principal residence, so you'd want to renounce before doing that. The bad, of course, is that, there is such a thing as tax citizenship since June 3rd, 2004. So, the relinquishing U.S. citizenship or renouncing it at the present time will sever U.S. tax residency, but you do have to have a certificate of loss of nationality. And the ugly, of course, is the whole exit tax issue, right? That applies to a certain number of people. And I think that I think it's impossible no long. I don't think it's really possible anymore for anybody who understands this to be neutral about getting out of the U.S.
And you know what? I want to circle back to that because your answer was so strong. So I think we want to just like, why is it so bad? And I have some very good ideas, but I want to hear from you. Why is the U.S. tax? Tell me why it's so terrible. Give me some specifics.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to go back to 24 hours ago. I was having a consultation with a young woman in her 30s, and she's been struggling with this decision for a very long time. She actually grew up in the United States. I think she's a dual citizen from birth, but the point is she grew up in the United States. And she's living outside the United States, and she is absolutely paralyzed in terms of moving forward with her life in every respect. I mean, let's start with the whole, what I think is now an obligation to engage in retirement planning and financial planning. She feels completely incapacitated from doing that. I mean, completely. Okay, and she mentioned the issue of, moving forward with her life in sort of a more social marriage type of thing. She doesn't want to burden, somebody outside the United States with this. And I mean, I think that these things have varying degrees of objective truth, right? I mean, I think that it is possible, to work around some of these things. But what it is, I think the U.S. citizenship disables people living outside the United States from progressing through life in a normal way. And, and that rears its ugly head in all kinds of different ways. I mean, we talk about things like, small business corporations or this or that. But I mean, unless you got a lawyer in tow or something like that, it's a real problem. And also, I would say, interestingly, just before this call today, I was having a conversation with somebody in another part of the world who just simply can't live with the stress of it anymore. Just can't. And by the way, I want to emphasize something here, okay? I want to speak very slowly, and I want to make sure you're listening. These are people who do and have made a point of being compliant with all of their U.S. tax obligations. Okay? So, I mean, this is not, these are realizations they have come to as a result of really trying to live this. And,
That is
a
a
year
great
ago,
point.
I would say, wait, hang on, blah, blah, blah. Now, these were both
Right.
relatively young people. Not that my opinion matters a great deal, and I don't want to overdo it, but I really got to say that the arguments for getting out of this have never been stronger. Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, and I have to.
And you do excuse me for a second, Anthony, and you do talk about, John, and it makes complete sense, and it's important to stress that these are people who are in the U.S. tax system and they've had enough. They just can't move forward. And then you have the other people. You have the other people who are in a quandary. They've never been in the U.S. tax system. What do? They're like, well, where's the incentive?
I think the answer to what do they do depends on what they want. What are they trying to achieve? What do they want their lives to look like?
Yeah,
I think that's really the question here. And I think there are different answers. I mean, I would have a general predisposition, okay, towards advising those who can get out by the book, from both the tax and nationality side, to bite the bullet and do so. Because largely what they're doing is buying their life back so that they don't have to worry about this stuff on a going forward basis. Look, there's nobody on the planet who I think is more committed to the view that this is an extremely indescribably unjust system and set of laws. But I think that people, they've got their lives to live, and I think they need to move forward. And, Keith and Anthony, you know perfectly well that most of the lobbying for change in this area is not even with a goal to severing citizenship from tax residency. It's a way of somehow making it a more perfect form of citizenship taxation. It's not. They got to get out.
The gaslighting is pretty significant, I have to say. The advocates are all the slave masters. They're saying, shut up, don't complain, it's perfect the way it is. Isn't this great what we're doing for you?
We'll just have carve-outs.
What's that?
We'll just have carve-outs for specific people.
Yeah.
That's
so, and those are the carve-outs. And let me, let me talk about the problem that I have from a practitioner's point of view. There are so many different penalties, and I have to think of two different sets of law. I have to think of Title 31 and Title 26 because of the FBAR and other foreign reporting. So there's two different standards, two different laws. There's various different reporting forms for various different things, carve-outs galore, depending on a treaty, depending on what happens. So when someone asks me a question, I do often wonder, did I just tell them the exact right thing because I didn't understand their question? Or did I just say the wrong thing? Because I didn't realize I said the wrong thing, because it is so hard to keep track of every little single thing. And now we also know this, and this is, I think, where you really get to the absurd part, that there's another report showing that IRS employees themselves are vastly delinquent with their tax filings. And it appears as if a rate that is higher than the public at large. I haven't done the math yet. Just that story's out right now. So we have, that's the fact. Okay, so we have a tax system that people working on the tax system can't quite comply with themselves. We have penalties that who knows? And it's awful. You get a call of someone, you're like, yeah, I don't know if you should file because I could see the risk of filing it and I could see the risk of not filing it. And you're trying to parse this out. Which way do I go? And then the client gets another opinion. Well, that opinion might be right. And you're arguing, well, I don't know who's right. And well, we all might be right. There isn't any cut boundaries, and you drive yourself nuts. How am I really advising people? So I say, back off. You know what? If you want a solution to this, renounce.
And there's no cookie cutter approach. Everybody's situation is different. I was just talking to someone the other day who's a Brit, and she left the United States. How old was she? 9 months or 8 months of age. She doesn't even have a U.S. passport. Okay, she has no ties to the U.S. She wants to renounce. but she's afraid that she's going to lose her shirt if she renounces and gets U.S. tax compliant. So what does she do? You know,
Well,
so you have so many situations like
Good
that.
question.
You know, and this is not her situation, but let's say she has a small business. Okay. Well, what's that going to look like if she becomes U.S. tax compliant and renounce? You see, it's a very,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
it's also on the business thing. It's very much a country by country determination.
Yeah,
Some countries, these small business corporations can be treated as pass-throughs, and others they're deemed corporations. I mean, this is another big part of the whole injustice of the way the U.S. tax system impacts Americans abroad. It actually depends on what country they live in, and it's not
right.
just treaties. It's not just the treaty.
Yeah. Right.
If you look at the
Doesn't-
Treasury
right.
regulations for the entity classification rules, Treasury made up a bunch of rules. So, all except for some kind of a New Brunswick or Nova Scotia corporation, small business corporation in Canada is a per se corporation, meaning there's no opportunity to check the box, et cetera. You go to the UK or Australia, and there are different options. But, nobody can know this stuff unless they have not only a full-time lawyer in tow, but the right kind of, it's impossible.
And that's the thing you just said there, John. And that's a question that I get a lot is if I need to go to a U.S. tax compliance professional, whether that be a CPA or a tax attorney, depending on their situation, what are the things that they need to look for in that tax compliance professional? And what are the red flags that they need to be aware of when they find somebody?
Okay.
Vis-a-vis even reasonable costing and so forth. I can't tell you how many, one last point, I can't tell you how many people have gotten ripped off by U.S. tax compliance professionals because they paid an arm and a leg and they didn't have to do it. So these are questions that are out there swirling around.
I want to handle that. Because here's the thing you need to understand. When you're wondering who to hire to get help, the question you need to answer, and this is unfortunate, is who do they represent? Who do they truly represent? A great way to do this is see who their political donations go to. And honestly, if they're donating to anybody, they're probably supporting the system. So I would want to make sure your professional's really on your side, that they're actually representing their clients. They're not actually lobbying for more complicated rules so that now there's more abundant opportunity to charge you. Many people claim that this is what the big four do all day, every day, is they take all their substantial profits and they go to Congress to lobby for more and more compliance so that their clients have to pay them more money. Those people might be correct. I think those people might be correct. That's what I hear from people at Big Four, and that's what the lobbying reports like that. And we even know firms like H&R Block do that same thing. H&R Block has lobbied Congress to make tax compliance more difficult, even in situations where H&R Block's software messed up. It's quite a story. So that is the number one thing I would say. Who do they actually represent? Because they might sound like they're on your side, and then you kind of notice your arm getting twisted. Like, well, hey, look, I didn't come here for that. And then somebody might say, well, if you don't file this, I'll file a report against you. And that's a concern. So I would say maybe you want to make sure you talk to an attorney, that you're getting legal advice. Say, look, I am merely getting the legal advice of what the cost is, and then I'll take care of it from there. I'm not hiring you to engage me in tax compliance, but rather tax investigation. That's what I would want to do. That way, hey, look, I'm just doing an investigation for you to see what it is. We'll limit to that. I'm in no obligation to file for you or anything like that. What you tell me is confidential, and we're going to keep it here. And that's what I'd really be worried about, because it's time and time again, as we get take cases over, we see that. We see the Big Four firms, we see a lot of the big firms telling people what they're going to do, charging huge, monstrous fees for no safety tax or anything, all for the wrong result. And so I don't blame why people don't want to contact anyone, with good reason. They really do. You have great reason not to contact these people. They really will work against you, because the fact is they've been working against you. You just haven't known that. Now I'll hand over to John.
Okay, let me take a stab at that from a slightly different angle. So what I have the way I experience this, okay, sort of on, when people are concerned with this whole problem is, they say, well, I want to know what it's going to cost me, to come into compliance, this sort of thing, right? And
Yeah.
there is no way to know that, all right, without actually spending some time with somebody and understanding what their situation looks like and various options for running that through, what the U.S. tax system would be. What people need to understand is that for a majority of people, the work that's required is the initial upfront work of understanding the situation and deciding, what is it they actually have to file, et cetera, et cetera. So I think people need to shift their expectations a little bit, okay, in terms of what it is they're looking for, because it's simply impossible unless you're dealing with somebody who has just a job on a bank account. It's impossible to pick up the phone and say, what will this cost? All right, because there are just too many issues. So that's the first point. All right. Second point is this: that again, these are my opinions. All right, these are my opinions, and they're the way I experience the world doesn't make them right. But I do think that generally people ought to have a consultation at least with somebody who does this kind of work in the country they live in, because they're going to be able to, that person is more likely to be able to interpret their say UK tax return alongside, because they'll understand more about what the retirement planning things they're engaged in and stuff like that. So but those are just sort of presumptions. Now that's stuff that has to do with, what does your situation look like from a tax point of view? A separate issue, right, from what it looks like is if you want to comply with this stuff, how do you get this stuff into the system, right? Would you get it in through, say, a streamlined, or would you just file? Would you file going forward only? And then why are you doing it? Is it for renunciation? What citizenships do they have? Where do they get them? If they're over $1 million, is there the possibility of dual citizenship from birth exemption applying? I mean, like, this stuff takes time. So, somebody calls up and says, well, I want to know what's going on. I mean, just get off the phone. I mean, they're asking you to do the impossible.
So it's unreasonable for someone to ask. It's unreasonable for someone to ask, hey, John, hey, Anthony, can you just do a top line simulation of what it would look like? You actually have to get into the nuts and bolts of it to really see what their tax liability is going to look like.
The whole thing, basically.
That type of thing for somebody without being paid. I would never even consider it.
Oh, no, I know.
That's where the work is.
Yeah, no, it's important to know. It's important for people to realize that.
It's
last point. At the end of the day, after you share with them, this is what your tax liability will look like or may look like, then they can make the decision on what they want to do.
Yep. But essentially, you have to go up to that goal line. So it's basically doing all the work, and then it's just like, sign it or not.
Right.
And then that's up, then leave that up to the client, whether they want to do. We've had some people renounce over the past, few years, and they seem like they're in an enviable position. I think really a question I'm going to have for John, and you're going to like this one, I think, just to sort of highlight the absurdity, because I'm going to ask a question. John's got an answer in a way, and it's going to sound, you're going to expect John would say the opposite. But I'm going to ask John a question. I know his answer already. John, what is the top tax haven in the world? Which country is it?
Oh, there's no question. It's the United States of America. There's absolutely no question on that. In fact, if you're looking for a tax haven, if you're a U.S. citizen, renounce your U.S. citizenship and then put your money there as a non-resident alien.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That is absolutely right. The number one tax shelter in the world is United States. And this is sort of where I look, there might be something going on behind the scenes with our tax code, that it's really funny that you can get every tax benefit in the world is if you have your money in the US, And not only that, there will be no information sharing with any
Right.
country.
Right.
No, we don't spare money to anything. And then you also, there's various ways to put it in a corporation that very difficult to find your interest. For instance, a Las Vegas corporation. Now there are reporting requirements with the IRS, but if you're trying to hide things from your own country, oh my Lord, it's the easiest place by far. The issue is this: you need to have money. That's the thing. If you're working, it doesn't work so well. But if you have plenty of money, by far, no question about it, the United States is the best tax shelter in the world. I've done some content on a particular tax shelter that I think is the best. If I had the resources, this is where all of my stuff would be in. It'd be a private placement life insurance policy. It's something that's allowed by statute. You put all your investments into a private placement life insurance wrapper, and then you borrow from the death benefit, tax-free for the rest of your life. No state tax, no anything. That's the number one tax play. The problem is you got to be wealthy to get it in the first place. So that's to understand really what we're talking about, the complete absurdity or whatever the most likely result would be. That the tax code favors the strong and it punishes, hammers the weak.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yeah, the average person.
That's right. I think what people need to understand on a more pedestrian level, because most people don't have those kinds of resources. Be this, right? So, U.S.
No, I don't quite either. Not yet. Working on it.
Yeah, nor do I. But I mean, the U.S. tax code is designed, like perhaps other countries, designed to attract foreign capital to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
This is done, by providing various tax benefits. And by the way, the genesis of the current exit tax started in 1966 at exactly the same time these non-resident alien tax rules began to attract capital into the United States. So the idea is to attract the capitals of the United States in a way where it's taxed only in limited circumstances. And then the fact that the U.S. is not part of the CRS means there's no information exchange. So it's actually possible for people to put their capital in the United States and get a decent return on it. The U.S. has good capital markets, and and not have to report that, or at least with an expectation that the United States will not report the existence of that to another country. I mean, obviously,
right.
I'm presuming that as a matter of your local law, you're required to do it. But this is a big problem. Well,
It is, and I personally know people who do it who are non-Americans, and what they do is they put their money in the United States, and their respective countries' tax authorities know nothing about it.
I mean, is that an argument for renouncing U.S. citizenship?
Well, I don't know if it
Depends
is.
on the person.
It's basically you have to decide what you have to. I think you have to decide what you are. Are you somebody that the tax code? Can you take advantage of the tax code, or will you always be punished by it? And if you can't take advantage of it, if you can't find a way to take advantage of it and make it work for you, it's going to be hurting you, right? That's what it's either helping you or hurting you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people it actually helps tremendously. It actually can truly help people. But then it hammers. I mean, I don't see how it helps any expat. There's not any global investment it can help. It helps people who invest in the U.S. That's who it helps.
Well, that's right. And on this point, I just had this thought that I want to add to what you're saying, Anthony. Is that if you look around, for example, as you know, I live in Canada. And there's a lot of back and forth, obviously, because of geography in Canada and the United States. There are people who sort of focus on U.S. citizens living in Canada and what their issues are. And then there's a group of people who focus on, what I would say, getting people into the United States, sort of pre-U.S. immigration planning. And what's fascinating to me is the world looks entirely different. Right? Those two people. So you have the people who want to go to the United States, right? Because they are going to become U.S. tax residents in the United States.
Yep.
They don't have the problems of trying to live as a U.S. citizen outside the United States. And I think that they fail to distinguish these two types of advisors, right? the types of people who are the, let's figure out how to retire in Florida group are absolutely not the people you want to be helping you on, I'm trying to survive as a U.S. citizen outside the United States group.
That's a great
I mean,
point.
Absolutely.
because I think there's a presumption that because somehow each of these people, these two types of people have a certain degree of overlap, right, in terms of, U.S. tax issues, et cetera, that they're doing the same thing, and they're not doing the same thing at all. They're completely different. And the ones who are concerned only with getting them in, I mean, yeah, I agree that there are, there's a bunch of issues, in terms of getting them in, they have to worry about from a tax and an immigration point of view. But by far the biggest problem is trying to help the U.S. citizens who live outside the United States, because now this is the point. U.S. citizens living outside the United States are actually subjected to a separate and more punitive tax system than U.S. residents. But the ones who want to get into the United States are essentially joining the more benign tax system for resident Americans. And that's why these are entirely different groups of people. And never should they be confused. So if you're looking
and I would say this:
for advisors, okay, actually,
Yeah.
for people listening, you want advisors who work with U.S. citizens or taxpayers who don't live in the United States. You do not want advisors who are focusing on how to get people in the United States.
Yeah.
Even though, and I would say that,
Very
living
good point.
overseas, I would say this: living overseas as a U.S. person is a piece of cake. If all your money's in the United States, I mean, it's remarkably easy.
Right. But that's not
too much to
realistic
do.
for the average American overseas. That's
So
not
just
realistic.
be really wealthy and have all your stuff in the U.S. and you have no problems, right? That's all.
Yeah.
That's right. But those are not people. I think we're talking about the people who are, what I would call tax residents of other countries who, have to interact with those other tax systems. But you do make a good point, Anthony. And we talk about, the whole issue of change in the tax laws, and the group of people who I would call retirees abroad, right? The ones who, are living off their U.S. pensions or whatever outside the United States, are very, very suspicious of a move to residence-based taxation because they're worried about they're worried about their U.S. source income being taxed them as though they're a non-resident alien, right?
Very true. Yeah.
Oh,
I do get
that's
there are concerns.
dividing line on this whole thing.
All right, Keith, what other questions do we have? We are coming near the end. But we want to make sure we're answering.
Yeah.
The big questions.
Here's a question that I get a lot, and I think we need to squash any misinformation. What I get is this, and it's a twofold. When an American overseas, accidental American, whatever, gets a FATCA letter, okay, from their bank, and they complete the proper forms for that particular bank, they think in their mind they have entered the U.S. tax system. Number one. Number two, some of these people, specifically accidental Americans, have never had a Social Security number. And they go and they get a Social Security number so they can satisfy their bank so their account isn't closed. They think that they may be entering the U.S. tax system as a result. What do you guys think about that? Are they actually in the U.S. tax system by those two actions or not?
I want to handle that first one. The first question, and
The FATCA letter.
Yeah, if you filled out that FATCA letter, I can tell you what happened with that data that you filled out. Nothing. The IRS commissioner admitted all the FATCA documents they got, they didn't do anything with, just like we predicted that they were getting things in a non-standard format. How are they going to compile this massive data into one database? And the fact that they haven't, so that they don't even know that you complied with the FATCA letter. That's the fact. So whatever you wrote in that doesn't even matter. You could have wrote you were the king of Siam, and you could have wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for your Social Security number. No one would know. So that's what I would answer on that one. So I would say you're definitely not in the system because they don't even know. Check those statements. We had a video on that earlier this summer. Chuck Redding is saying, yeah, we don't do anything with that FATCA stuff. It goes all, we haven't touched it. We don't even know what's in it.
Now, how about obtaining a Social Security number?
That does not enter you, as far as I'm concerned. John, what do you say?
I think the answers to all of your questions, Keith, are no, no, and no. I don't remember exactly what they were, but there were three, and each one was
Well, it was actually two: the FATCA letter
it's
and
no and no.
obtaining.
It's no and no.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I get a lot of people asking these
But
questions
on
of
the
me.
narrow question you're asking,
Yes.
have they entered the U.S. tax system? The answer is no. But the banks, as I understand it, are so. Step one is, do you admit to being America, and you've got a U.S. birthplace, which
Yeah.
which is a problem.
Problem.
The problem is that if you admit to being American, then you're supposed to have the Social Security number, right? And as I understand it, in Netherlands, for example, there's this issue of people being dropped from the banks because they don't or can't get a Social Security number. I think that this is another reason why people ought to renounce U.S. citizenship. I mean, I really do. It's life is too difficult, and I wouldn't worry about it so much from the tax perspective as I would from the perspective of I mean, how much you like invest in, whether you're allowed to have a goddamn bank account like every other person in the rest of the world. It's just not worth it.
Or to be able to retire.
What's
have a
next?
retirement savings. Yeah.
Change their focus. I really think that people need to stop concentrating on the obvious injustice and all this and just get out of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, why do you want to be a citizen of a country that
Right.
does this to people anyway?
And I would say if you are not living in the U.S. working overseas, renounce. There's nothing good for you. There's nothing good for you here. If you want to take advantage of the greatest tax shelter in the world and have the abilities, then fully become a U.S. person and embrace it and love it. But if you're trying to be a regular person overseas, making it day to day with the crazy surprises, I mean, these people are crazy with the things they put in there. We didn't even talk about the transition.
Yeah. And we never know what's going to happen in the future.
We
What other
don't
future?
know anything. We live and we're lawless. There's no oversight. There's no nothing. The IRS does this stuff, see what happens. They do something wrong. Oh, well, let's try again. There's no justice. There's no nothing. And the vast majority of the U.S. tax compliance industry doesn't care about you.
And remember, Anthony, it's not just the IRS, because they're the enforcement arm. It's also what bill may come up that goes into law with Congress.
Oh, right. We have no idea. Anything is on the table.
And it's not even intentional. I mean, as long as citizenship taxation exists, any tax law has the potential to do damage to U.S. citizens. But Keith, I just thought of something I want to add to that answer about, dealing with the banks. Okay. So the problem is, of course, if you have a U.S. birthplace, right, and you're kind of stuck with a thing. FATCA IGAs do have a curing provision for that. If you don't have a certificate of loss of nationality. And basically, and this is an oversimplification, but if you have a relinquishing act prior to June 3rd, 2004, and if you can write this up properly, you may be able to cure the U.S. birthplace.
Yeah.
That doesn't apply to everybody, but I have successfully helped people with that. Well,
I've seen it done through you and also others. I've seen that done. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't apply to everybody, but that's a possible way of managing it. I mean, it doesn't. What it does is it solves the problem vis-a-vis the bank. One last thing, Keith, that you've not asked about,
yes,
but I think people ought to be aware of is this: that, and I'm seeing more and more of this. Okay. People do die, right? And it's not great to die as a U.S. citizen living outside the United States.
Oh, yeah.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And also people often have spouses, and those spouses often die too. This happens. And, I see a lot of sort of U.S. citizens who think they're below the 2 million net worth thing, and then a spouse dies, they inherit it all, then they're over the 2 million, and could be subject to exit taxes. So again, I really, here we are at the end of 2022. I feel almost a responsibility to be much more vocal about the benefits of renunciation, all right, than I have previously. I mean, this is a very, very big problem. I've seen so many people's lives just irreparably damaged because of this, and I think they should be getting out. I really do.
And I want to add a couple things to add to that, and really, and something I would add from a practitioner standpoint. Why renouncing is, if you're living overseas, makes a lot of sense. Is it's unpredictable.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you what's going to happen here. They are making stuff up and they just do these things and they go crazy. And we try to undo what the IRS does, and there's a big fight. Maybe we're successful, maybe we're not. But they are so unpredictable, wild, unaccountable. They don't, and they always go after the weak thing. They don't go after the people who are hard.
Yeah.
Additionally, and to tie on what you said, people don't realize they go over these levels. Something that's going to be happening, it's happening in the US, it's happening around the world to a greater degree, is inflation. So you have 8% inflation after a few years. Yeah, you weren't underneath. Yeah, you didn't have, your property wasn't worth that, but now on paper, they say it goes over that because they just printed more money and now you have to pay the price. So what's the harm? And this is the thing, and I've talked to a lot of clients who are like, look, I love the US. I can't believe I'm actually going to do this, but I feel nothing towards it. And it's like, that's where you say, you know what? I'm more of an individual than someone who's a subject. I've had enough.
Yeah.
And you walk.
Oh, Anthony, to inflation, I would add exchange rate risk. Okay.
Yeah.
It's also huge.
There you go.
I'll give you a very simple example on this. In 2011, the Canadian US dollar were, I think, at par. This is 2022. I don't know where it is, but I think it's about 75 cents or something, or maybe 80 cents. But the point is that as the Canadian dollar falls, right, the threshold essentially increases for people, right? But it goes up and down. So you've got inflation, you've got exchange rate risk, all kinds of stuff. And it's a very sad thing. All right, it's a very sad thing. But I think people need to face up to the world they live in, and not the world they imagine it to be.
Yeah,
very good point.
Yeah, I do. The exchange risk, huge. That is a really great point, and it's separate from inflation because it could be kind of a backwards sort of contraindication of that too.
I'd have to say, just to
anything else, Keith? What else?
No, I just what I'm getting from both of your answers and dialogue is that if you're an American, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, if you're an American overseas or accidental American, an American immigrant with an E, don't automatically do something. Do your research. Make sure that you're doing what's best for you. There's no cookie cutter approach.
Well, I think I actually go further. Keith, because I think at one point I will say this. If you are a U.S. immigrant with a business overseas, the default assumption must be renounce. Someone needs to tell you why you should stay in here. Why you should stay in here, and the compliance cost. Come on, for someone with an LLC, a tax return, we're doing this, 1120 or something like that.
Yeah.
It could be $600-800 for a tax return, for a business tax return.
Right.
You take that same information and throw it on a 5471. Okay, we got $8,000. Who knows? And we have penalties if something's not right. So I mean, night and day, same amount. You might not even have revenue. And then you could be making nothing. Your exchange rate stinks so much, that your $10,000 worth of compliance cost with the IRS is actually costing more like $100,000.
Yeah, it could be ruinous.
I look at their books. I'm like, okay, look, just for you to file your return, I'm going to be taking about half of your income. I don't know if you want to get into the system, my friend. I don't know if you really want to do that. You're not going to have anything left.
And that's why John said, a renunciation is an investment in your future. And if you can't afford the fee right now to renounce, it's best to take out a personal loan and look at it as an investment of you living a normal life moving forward.
Yeah.
Wow.
I do think that it is true. And although this might sound like it's intended to be humorous, it might sound humorous, but I'm very, very serious. With few exceptions, there's always exceptions, but with few exceptions, renouncing U.S. citizenship for a U.S. citizen living outside the United States is the single most best financial investment they can ever make.
Yeah.
It will pay dividends like every second, for the rest of your life. I mean, I do understand that, there are other issues, but the existing problems, I mean, the way I look at it is this: the existing problems are very, very bad. They have not improved. All right.
No.
I see parallels to 2011, this emphasis, and sort of, trying to find tax cheats, et cetera. We have the Democrats again, all right, who's the party that's going to, that deliberately goes after Americans abroad. And I also, as painful as it is for me to say this, and I mean no ill will towards anybody, absolutely, but I do not think that I don't think that there's much support for severing citizenship from tax residency.
No.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
I think
No.
Keith,
No, Keith, I just want to quickly, I want to introduce is that for those who are looking like, well, maybe, if we get different people, we vote for different people, the other side comes in. Well, let me just point this out to you. It was Kevin McCarthy who put that transition tax in there, 965. Yeah. That guy, he was a Republican, is a Republican, and he put that piece of garbage in there. So if you're thinking that there's like a Republican on your side who's going to come to the rescue, yeah, good luck with that. Good luck. They don't care, and you are just.
They don't care that they don't care. That's the big
deal.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
That transition tax is so insane. Those people should be in prison.
Right. And who knew what was coming? That's the point. Who knew that was coming? So who knows what's going to come next year?
Right. How do we know what's going to come next?
So twofold. Okay. Everybody has a problem with the U.S. tax code in the sense that we don't know what's coming, but it has particularly vile repercussions when it's applied to people who don't live in the United States, right? Who are tax residents of other countries. Now, look, I do think there are people who should retain U.S. citizenship. I do think there are.
Sure.
And these are people.
If you're working overseas for Microsoft or something, sure.
Well, or their financial footprint is in the U.S. But for this average,
right? For
most of these people who aren't interested in this, don't want to try to understand it, don't have the money for expensive, a tax advice if they can even find it. It seems to me they fall into two groups. The first group are people who do have some assets from hard work, and they need to renounce to protect those assets. The second group are the people who have nothing and have no assets, and they need to renounce so they can accumulate some assets. In summary, as I have been saying for years, but I'm just feeling more vocal about it today, all roads lead to renunciation.
Yeah. And you're not only protecting yourself, you're also protecting your loved ones by doing it. Your wife, your husband, your kids. Can you imagine
renouncing U.S. citizenship? The most loving. How about a Valentine's Day?
There you go, right?
Valentine's Day.
I renounced, honey. Yeah, you open it up.
Have a man goes to his wife, has inside a box, all nice stuff, and says, "Oh, my love, open this." She opens it, and what is it? The CLN.
And that the most romantic night of their night follows.
Not a diamond is forever, but a CLN is forever.
Oh, that's what the lady really wanted.
Anyway, what the U.S. has done to America is indescribably despicable and disgusting.
It is. It is terrible.
And there is no change. There is no advocates. There is nothing. There is nothing.
We try to do the best we can, to advocate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's like there's like 6 of us, I think, right? We're half of the team right here.
Right.
There's not
Exactly.
a lot. No, we do have a lot
That's
of
the
people on the
point.
side,
There is no
but
support. And let me tell you why this is. I mean, it's fascinating. There's no support for actually doing what needs to be done, which is separate
no,
and different tax residency.
good Lord, no.
Because nobody has it as their prime focus. We have the bank account types. We're just concerned with being able to get a bank account. We have the people who, think that by raising, the foreign earned income exclusion or something, they're not concerned with severing citizenship. They're just concerned with their own situation. The problem is everybody's concerned with their problem, however it's affecting them, rather than the problem, which is citizenship taxation. And a lot of the bigger sort of lobbying groups who are supposed to be working on this are absolutely positively not defining the goal as severing citizenship from tax residency. It's something else. So get out now.
I echo that, and we got to go here. We're out of time. I want to
Yeah.
complete this a few years. Now, this is an episode I have on here. There's an old episode. I'm going to try to link that in the description. Hopefully, I don't forget. My friend Ryan Socash, we brought him through the entire Streamline program, and he renounced. That was years ago.
Yeah.
He's happy now. He's happy now, and you can find it. I'll have a link to his channel. It's History. He's doing great. He's doing a lot of history things. YouTube is jamming, and he's a lot more productive now. I call him and he's like, I don't even think about this stuff anymore. I can't tell you how wonderful it is. I don't think about it 5471. I'm not up late at night wondering about penalties.
It's
unicorns and
a new
rainbows
life.
for him.
It's like, it's the creation of a new life. I mean, people do
Yeah.
not realize how overlawed and how bureaucratic the United States is. I mean, it's just over the top. I mean, of course, there are some countries that are worse, but there's a lot that are better. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the main point here.
Yeah, that is for sure. All right. So with
Well,
that,
I thank you, gentlemen, for answering these questions. This is going to be very good for a lot of people.
Keith, I really appreciate this because I think it coalesces our response because we've been watching this and trying to hope that there's going to be a cavalry coming. There isn't. There is not. Wise up. If you are an expat business owner with a lot of things overseas, it's time to either talk to John or me or somebody like us.
There is the lawsuit. Okay. I mean, we are bringing the lawsuit. All right.
Right.
My point is simply this, that there are people working on getting rid of this, okay, in various ways, but it is not the critical mass of people.
Yeah.
It is not the strength in numbers that is required here. So
It's not guaranteed.
I wonder if Americans just don't love citizenship taxation.
Right.
It's good. I don't know.
Yeah, and you have people that, certainly should go to you and John, but I have people that do come to me where I can be that initial individual that kind of ascertain what direction they need to go in. So it's important to just step back and gather as much information as possible.
The time, yeah, there's no better time to renounce than yesterday. Today's second best, and I think that's really where we're at.
Actually, on that point, Sir John Templeton, one of the greatest human beings and investors of all time, who really invented the concept of the foreign mutual fund. Well, two points, okay? First of all, the subpart F regime, which is the precursor to Gildian transition tax, came into law in 1962. Could you believe it? In 1964, he renounced U.S. citizenship. Who could have known?
No way.
Absolutely. One of the wisest men in history renounced. But the second question, he was often asked was, when's the best time to invest? And he said, well, whenever you have money, because he wasn't interested in trying to time markets. So, Anthony, I'm going to ask you a question. When's the best time to renounce U.S. citizenship?
When you can.
Exactly. On that note.
Thank you very much, Keith, John, a great episode. And please, folks, leave your questions below. And we'll be answering some of the comments in our next episode. Thanks again so much for joining us today. This is the time right now. Thanks again.